So welcome. As I said, the fourth and final session in our four-part conversation series on supporting children with disability, developmental delay and autism in primary school. This series is brought to you by Belongside Families, formerly known as Kindred to some of you, in partnership with the Early Childhood Intervention Best Practice Network. Today's session is focusing on what to do if it's not working. And we're very fortunate to be joined by two wonderful speakers who will share their expertise and experiences. So we have Peter. Peter is an early intervention educator at Early Ed who brings both professional expertise and lived experience as a parent of a child with disability. And Melissa, who is mother to Emily, who is autistic and has an intellectual disability. Melissa's going to share her family's journey navigating school transitions and finding the right educational setting. As always, through this whole series, I want to acknowledge that everyone's journey is unique, and we encourage you to take what resonates with your situation and discuss it with your child support network. That might be with your family, their educators, their therapists, and medical professionals. The best outcomes often come from a collaborative approach where families work together with their child's team to adapt strategies that suit their specific circumstances. So let's jump into it. And Peter, I'm going to go to you first, put you on the spot. But you've got quite a unique perspective as both a professional and a parent. How do you recognise when a school situation isn't working well for a child?
Yeah, so a few different things. I guess there's some more obvious ones like teachers and the staff expressing some concerns around supporting the child, and they might be frustrated with particular behaviours or academic and learning challenges for the child within the classroom. So you might get lots of emails or phone calls about what's happening at school, and obviously that's pretty obvious that something's not working very well. But also there might be some, signs in your child at home or at school. There might be some anxiety or distress about going to school. They might be having some emotional outbursts at school or at home or both, where it might be a signal of some frustration or that things aren't going well. They might also have some regression in their behavior. So perhaps skills that they previously had, they may not be able to do while they're at school or even at home. So some of that regression. And I think also, thinking about how you feel about it, like whether you feel like you're being supported and heard by your school as a parent, and your gut feeling around, if there's a change in your child's behavior and you think that perhaps that might be because things aren't working well at school, really trust your gut on that too. They're probably the most obvious signs to me that something isn't working well for the child.
Yeah, a trust in your instincts. Oh my gosh, it's something that's hard to do initially, but I think once you can tune into them, it's actually, a godsend, really. Melissa, I've seen you nodding your head quite a lot through when
Yes.
Peter was saying some of those things. So I want to come to you now, and I want you to, can you share with us when you first began to realise that Emily's initial school placement might not be the best fit for her needs?
Thank you. It was actually exactly what Peter said. So this started when Emily was in year 3. Emily needed a lot of one-to-one support. By year 3, she was not getting that at all. And then with the minimal aid she was getting, the aid had 0 experience with neurodivergent children. So that was a bit concerning considering she was in year 3 at that time. When there was no aid, the teacher was expressing a lot of concerns that she was having a lot of difficulties with supporting Emily the best that she could. And with a lot, I have to say, I'm quite the advocate. I was always supporting the school and guiding them. Emily's team was always supporting the school and guiding them. Over this first semester, there wasn't much changing from the school's end. So that kind of sent some alarm bells that things weren't working. And also my daughter, whilst she was very happy to go to school, she was very overwhelmed whilst she was there because her needs weren't being met. So again, that just, I thought to myself, nothing's working. Nothing seems to be working from the school's end. Emily is very distressed while she's there. I've done all I can. Nothing seems to be working. The Department of Education got involved. They sent out someone to assess the school, seeing if the school's doing everything they could. Once those formal processes started happening, I thought to myself, I can't imagine this working again moving forward. So that was our experience. Yeah.
And it sounds like it was that instinct at the end there going.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly what Peter's just said. Peter, what are some of the signs parents should look for that might indicate that their child's current school arrangement needs to be reassessed?
Yeah, so I guess some of those signs above sort of fall into this this question as well. Lots of communication from the school that, there's behaviors or things at school that aren't working, but also at home, really increased fatigue or exhaustion. If they're coming home from school and really struggling, or you're having those lots of meltdowns in the afternoon with lots of behaviors, that can be a really big sign that something's not working. Any changes in eating or sleeping patterns, whether they're coming home or coming home with a full lunchbox, haven't eaten anything at school all day and absolutely ravenous at home, or perhaps, the opposite, where they're just not eating much at all, having difficulty sleeping, are really big signs that maybe you might want to look at, what's happening at school. And also on a social side, like, are they engaged in activities at school, group activities? Are they being included in activities? I can remember my son wanted to play PWSA softball, and it was a really big situation for the school. They really struggled with doing it, and there was a lot of pushback on that. With a lot of advocating, we did get there in the end, but, just that whole openness to solve problems, alongside me, based on his interest, was sort of something that I did sort of start to think, is this the right environment for him? So yeah, there's some things. Also, bullying and the social isolation or being left out. If children are reporting that too, that might be an indicator that you might want to look at what's happening.
Yeah. And it can be quite an emotional journey, realizing that there might be a change needed. Melissa, when it came to Emily, what were some of the hardest aspects of that decision?
I was thinking to myself, how much am I going to say about this? Because at the time, this is how I felt. I definitely don't feel this way. It was the best thing I ever did, moving to a different school setting for her. But at the time, I felt like the biggest failure. I was so disappointed in myself. And I felt bad, and I was disappointed for Emily that I let her get to this point and that she was in an environment where she wasn't thriving. None of her needs were met: social, academic, emotional. So again, very disappointed in myself that it got to that point. But, as you mentioned earlier, I reached out to Emily's therapist, some family and friends. And I realized that maybe she was at a point in her life where she needed to move on. Everyone was doing everything they could and it just wasn't working. There was nothing else I could do. My options were all exhausted, so were the schools. So once I got over that, I think the hardest part was the actual acceptance, as you just mentioned, just accepting that a huge part of her life was going to change. Sorry, it wasn't working and it was going to change. Once I got over that acceptance and I realized that it was okay. Obviously, it's very scary moving somewhere that you're not even sure if that's going to work, which isn't the case, but you have that fear again, moving on, it might not work. But once I accepted it's time to move on, became very proactive with the little time I had with the school. And I guess the hardest part of that decision was accepting it.
Yeah. And I imagine there would have been some very difficult conversations that were had to have that time between yourself, your family, and the school. And Peter, I want to come to you now and just ask, like, what approaches have you found most effective when parents need to have those difficult conversations with schools?
Yeah, it's I think it's really important to be very prepared before the conversation. So have all of your information before you have the conversation. Get all your documentation together, any emails. Write yourself some notes. You know, I always, as a parent, go into a meeting with schools with a little checklist of things that I want to cover. And then at the end of the meeting, I make sure I look at that and make sure I've covered off everything, because you do get very emotional in those meetings. It's very hard to kind of detach and be emotionless when you're talking about your child and you're talking about a difficult situation. So being as prepared as possible is really important. And also knowing your child's rights, you know, like looking at the school policies, any education laws and inclusion guidelines can be really important as well, so that you're coming from that perspective of what your child's rights are. I guess it's important to, even though you are emotional and it's a difficult conversation, to kind of understand that the school is on your child's side, or they're trying to be. Potentially they don't have the knowledge that you have about your child, and so they're making decisions potentially that aren't coming from the same place that you are. So coming in with a collaboration lens as opposed to an attack or conflict lens, I think is really important. And that's when we kind of get the best outcomes as well. So when we can both come in with that approach is really good. So sort of looking at how we can work together rather than blaming either party is really important. And I think also having a support person with you, whether that's a friend or a family member or someone who's not as emotionally involved or invested as you. Even when I go to doctor's appointments, I like to have someone with me, because I find I might listen to something or take a perspective on something because it means something to me, but someone else will take a different approach to hearing that information as well. So I think that's always good to have someone there, listening to the information, taking some notes, who can ask different questions, but also you can talk to and debrief afterwards about, you know, what was just discussed as well. So sort of twofold there, you know, having the support person for an emotional perspective, but also having someone else taking in the information as well. And I think making sure that you kind of document the information that was discussed and everybody's on the same page. So making sure someone's sort of taking some minutes that are shared with everybody, so we kind of all know what was discussed and what the action plan is from there. Yeah, that are probably my tips for approaches.
And I love what you just said there, but I want to come to you, Melissa, because it's like, it's around that balance around advocating strongly for your child, which we do, and it is emotional, but also maintaining those productive relationships. Like, how did you go about that?
It was a very interesting process for me because, look, I was always, like I said, I was always advocating for my daughter from kindy. So I did have and it's a small school. So I did have a good rapport with the staff at the school across, even though they never taught Emily, we all knew each other. I was very consistent, especially when things got hard. So communication was always constant and open and honest, like that the whole way through, even when things got difficult. And I respected that the principal and the teacher were honest with me as well, and they were respectful in how they approached me. So I respected them back. We were always, especially when things got difficult, we were always collaborating about what more we could do from each of our ends. So we'd have meetings, take notes. There were actions from those in those minutes, as Peter was saying, to document everything. Once we met, we did the best we could. We'd reconvene, see what worked, what didn't work. I was always honest about how I felt and what my hopes were for Emily. And I approached that and communicated that in a respectful way. As I said, I did everything that I could. And at the same time, I was aware that whilst it may not look like a lot to some people, the school were doing everything they could with what they knew and had at the time. And I had to respect that as well, which I did. That's where your parent instinct comes in as well. So whilst I accepted that we need to move on, I did advocate to the very end, till the last day in that meeting, when they said everyone's done all they could. You know, I'll always be grateful for how respectful we were to each other during this time, because it's very difficult. It's not easy. These conversations are not easy to have. Having them with your family, having them with the school, having them with the therapist, with yourself. It's not easy to have these thoughts. And as Peter said, I want to bring this point back. Definitely bring someone with you to those hard meetings that is emotionally detached. That's what I did. I had my daughter's speech therapist boss come, because she had a lot of experience with these situations. So I thought, what better to have someone who's been in these meetings before. She took minutes. We sent that. I would highly recommend that, actually. So yeah, not easy, but we got through it.
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add on to that, Peter, around that balance between advocating strongly and maintaining positive relationships? Or do you think Melissa and yourself have covered it?
Yeah, I think just reiterating that, I think it's really important relationships are really at the core of everything, and being able to understand where they're coming from, having that honest, open, respectful relationship is really important to be able to maintain those relationships, but also advocate. And like Melissa said, being really clear on what your goals are, what you want out of the year or the term or the meeting at a smaller place. Being really open about that can really be helpful. And again, going back to just knowing your rights, knowing your child's rights, and coming from a place of knowledge with that, in the advocating part of that is I think important too.
Yeah. You've both talked about documenting things. Like Peter, you've talked about having someone take notes in meetings. And I'd love to hear from you both, but about those practical steps of documenting concern when things aren't working well and why it's important. Any of you can jump in there.
I had someone said to me once, a really good way of documenting things, because it's really hard to keep track of your documentation all the time, but just sending yourself an email when something happens or you want to document something, because it's got the date and timestamp on the email, and it can just go into an inbox. You don't even have to look at it, but then everything's just all there in the one place. So that's kind of a little tip. I think it is really important to keep documentation about what's happening, even if it's just your thought or something that occurred, but keeping that record. And I think that's a really good way of doing it, because you can do it when you're sitting waiting for an appointment, or after dinner when you sit down at night. You can just quickly flick that email to yourself and keeps that record with the date and so on.
I love that tip. That's a great tip.
Yeah, I want to laugh, because that was actually my note for this question, was write yourself emails. I wish I can share my screen and show you that. Yeah, look, and you know what, in hindsight, I wish I did it earlier at the beginning of the year, when I was having the verbal conversations with the teachers, because I did drop off and pick up. And like I said, small school, everyone bumps into each other. So when a teacher or the principal is having a conversation with you, whilst that was a mental alarm bell, I made a note. Probably should have sent myself an email about that. Because as you said, it's got the date and the time that this conversation took place. And then the longer these conversations kept happening, I said to the teacher, oh, can I just send you this in an email? So there was a conversation that was documented, that was acknowledged, that this verbal conversation took place. Whether there was an action after it didn't matter. I just wanted the teacher to know, we spoke after school. This is what was said. It's documented that we've both had this conversation. So yeah, that's what I did. A lot of emails backwards and forwards to each other.
I love that you do that, and it's something that I see as one of my downfalls. I like to have those on the fly conversations with people, and I need to get in the habit of going home and going, as per our conversation today, because then I'm like, did I say that to you? What happened? So yeah, really great tips. Melissa, I want to get to you now about the difference that you noticed in Emily once she transitioned to an environment that better suited her needs.
As Peter had discussed, you know, the concerns you have with the child at school when it's not working, the anxiety, dysregulation during school, after school, that completely disappeared. She was a whole new person. Thank goodness you know, the school setting, the support unit works very well for her. Teachers are great, kids are great. So, you know, her overall well-being improved, not just at school, but outside of school. So her therapist saw it, my family saw it, I saw it. It was nice to see that people could just see her. She was just happier. Her general well-being had completely improved. And also the positive domino effect about this is because those happy, regulated feelings were transferred outside of school, we were able to do more. She was able to just be more, do more outside of school, in the community as well, which I noticed that when I sat down and thought about it, I noticed that was the biggest difference. Being happy, thriving in a school environment, just helped with her overall well-being in the community. So like I said before, at the time, very emotional journey, but it ended up being the best thing I could do for her and our family.
Yeah, and I can just imagine that flow and effect of seeing your child so well supported, so regulated, so happy that has on you. Because
You don't realize until you actually go through it, the
yeah,
difference it makes to everyone's, especially their life, but everyone's life. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I'm so happy she's found the right space for her.
Thank
Um,
you.
I just want to talk about maybe just some resources and support networks that parents can turn to when they're navigating these challenging school situations. And I'm sure you probably both have different experience. I'd love to hear from you both. But are there supports? Are there resources that parents can turn to? What would you say to that, Peter?
I guess in the first instance, I would turn to your allied health team, any of the therapists that you're working with, to initially discuss your concerns and what's happening and gain their perspectives. And I think they're a really good source of information and resources as well. They'll be able to point you in different directions. And there are organisations out there that provide resources and supports, like advocacy in organisations like People with Disability Australia, School Can't Australia. There's services out there that can help provide information and resources. But your allied health team probably know your child, I won't say as well as you do, but but as well as their school does, and can sort of, you know, point you in that right direction for what's sort of relevant for that.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Melissa? What resources and supports did you turn to?
I definitely went to the her therapist first. I just shared my concerns with them first. And then I'm a big advocate for this peer support. I went down the peer support network. I think it's nice to talk to people that have actually had experience in this situation. There's heaps of advocacy groups that can guide you, as well as Peter said, but I did speak with her therapist. You know, they did have a lot of experience in this situation. So I found that very helpful. Yeah, and then I reached out to some parents who I knew were who went through a similar situation. So I reached out to them and they were very, very helpful.
And it even sounds like when you were talking about your journey earlier, that the Department of Education was essentially a resource in the end as well when they got involved. Like,
They actually were, yeah. I was quite surprised by that, but they were, yeah. And that was through the school. I didn't actually ask for them to come out. The school requested them, and they're actually very good for the school as well. So
yeah,
that
was
was
that
nice.
part of the learning and well-being for that department's
I believe it
school
was.
area? Yeah.
I believe it was, yeah. So the Department of Education is actually a great support to have at the school. You can always ask the school to reach out to them as well.
Yeah. So that is every school district within New South Wales has a learning and wellbeing officer, and I'll be sure to include the link so you can actually look up how to get in contact with them. But they are there to help navigate some of those challenges that you're having with the school, and they can provide supports not only for you but for the school and some further training.
Yeah, and I think this particular person was from like the disability department.
Yeah.
So I think the learning and wellbeing officer just reached out to that department and then they came out to the school, which I thought was wonderful.
That's great. It's really nice to hear. What advice would you both give to parents who are navigating some of the challenges that we've discussed today? I'll go to you, Peter.
I think going back to that team around the child, making sure you have a really trusted team around you and your child that you can go to for support, that you really feel add value. I mean, if you've got therapists or doctors, for example, that you don't really trust, then I'd maybe think about changing those so that you do have that really trusting team around you, because they can provide so much support in the journey, all the way along. So you probably are going to have to get used to having difficult conversations. And when you have that trusted team around you that you can talk to or go to, it really does make it easier. That's probably my piece of advice that I would I would have for families.
What about you, Melissa? What advice would you give to those parents?
I would definitely say advocate as best as you can with your team. Definitely reach out to your child's team, seek advice. I guess you want to ensure that everyone involved has your child's best interest at heart. I guess you've got to think of your child when you advocate, what's best for them. You know, obviously, you would want to advocate for your child in the current setting that they're in, but with your team, I would probably maybe try and explore what other options are available to your child just in case. Like we've been discussing, they're not easy conversations to have, but they're probably necessary conversations to have. At the end of the day, you know your child best and you know what environment will work best for them. But I definitely wouldn't try and do this alone. I would try and reach out to your child's team and just take a collaborative approach to this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there is something or there's one thing that you wish someone had told you earlier in your journey, because it is quite a journey, what would it be?
Want me to go first?
You can go first.
Well, someone did actually say this to me, but I do wish that they had said it to me earlier in the journey, because it wasn't until my son was starting high school that it was said to me. But it's just that you're not locked in, like there are options out there. If it's too difficult and it's not working, find out what the other options are and make an informed decision about whether it's going to be more beneficial to continue to have these difficult conversations, or whether it's going to be more beneficial to, try something different. It is scary. It is hard to think about, but sometimes, as Melissa said, that the grass on the other side of the fence might actually be greener. So making sure that you really know what else is out there, what the options are, and it's okay to change.
Yeah. And I feel like Melissa's like, you just took my line again.
You did, because I wrote, it's more than okay if it doesn't work. I guess, when you try your best and it doesn't work, that's okay. As Peter said, there are so many options available to your child. And, you said the D word, difficult, and that's what it looked like for us for a really long time. I was doing partial placement with a newborn, and I thought, I can't believe I put everyone's in this situation. Like, that's not working. I don't want this setup we have is not working. It's not, I don't want this for Emily. I don't want it for my little one, Annalise. I don't want it for me. So I guess it's just when it's becoming difficult, I guess I wish someone said to me, maybe recognize early on that it's okay, that it's difficult, and it's okay if it doesn't work out, you know, like sometimes advocacy looks like accepting it's not working and moving on from it, you know.
And I guess as well, the only thing I'd probably add there is for some families that might be in regional or rural areas where there might not be a lot of options, it's around that working together and finding that point of collaboration and bringing everybody's expertise into that space. So your expertise in your child, your therapist's expertise in therapy, and the educator's expertise in education. And trying to get everybody on the same page with a common goal. So I do recognise for some families that might be regional or rural, that can be quite difficult, but yeah, there are supports out there, and I think you've both mentioned them today. And I think, yeah, drawing on your team, the team around your child, seems to be probably one of the most pivotal messages from today. Melissa, we have had one little question in the chat, and if you're happy to answer, but just someone's curious to know, was Emily better supported in kindy and year one? Or was it that her level dropped as the years progressed, or was the support needs not met from the beginning?
She had a lot of support in kindy and year one, then it dropped the older she got. And then, gosh, I'm trying to say this in a respectful way, the quality of the support wasn't there in year three either. Like I said, the age she had for the minimal time she had zero experience. So
It just wasn't.
It just, yeah. So kindy in year one, she did. It just got less and less the older she got. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Thank you, Peter and Melissa. We've kept close to time. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights and experience with us today. It's real practical advice, and I love hearing the personal stories, particularly around those strategies for navigating the challenges when school experiences aren't meeting our expectations or our children's needs. Thank you to everyone that's watched on live today. So this is actually the last of our 4-part conversation series. I'm actually a little bit sad. I've really enjoyed doing them, but I want to take a moment to reflect on the journey that we've had together through these series. So we have explored best practice therapy in schools, individual education plans, building collaborative relationships, and, you know, discussing what to do when it's not working as planned. But I think through these sessions, what's been emphasized is the importance of advocacy, collaboration, and communication in supporting your child's primary school experience. We really hope that these conversations have provided you with some strategies and the confidence to advocate for your child in a school setting. And I think most importantly, remember that you know your child best, and your voice and perspective are invaluable in ensuring that they receive the support they need to thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. So yes, thank you to everyone that's participated throughout this whole series. All the session recordings will be available soon. I will share links to all of those when I send out the resource email with the recording today. And yes, if you need any ongoing support or information, please visit our website, reach out to your team directly, and we wish you and your child the best on their primary school journey. So thank you so much, Peter. Thanks, Melissa. And thank you to everyone that's watching. Happy hump day. Hope you all have a
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.